very few viewers and listeners, and to my even fewer subscribers. Before this episode gets started, I wanted to give you a quick little message to put it in context. There's two unusual things about this conversation you're about to see or to listen to. One of those is that I didn't initially record it for the bench. In fact, I recorded it before I came up with the idea for this at all, but the themes of community that it addresses, I think, really fit very well with what I'm trying to do with this project. And second, this was recorded quite a while ago. This was actually recorded back in October. It deals with the events of the recent conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. When I recorded this interview, I was doing it as background information for an article I was writing, which I'll certainly link to in the show notes. And at that time, the conflict had just started, and the outcome was still very much in doubt. A few weeks after that, hostilities were concluded, and by any objective measure, Armenia lost the war. They were outgunned and outnumbered by Azerbaijan and had no real allies in the fight. Azerbaijan was able to reclaim much of the land that was taken from them by Armenia in the 1990s, and several Armenian citizens, thousands of them, had to evacuate those areas and move back to Armenia proper. And Russia has sent and committed a number of soldiers to keep the peace in the region for at least the next several years. From what I can tell, it's been very difficult for Armenia to deal with the ignominy of defeat. Many of the Armenian people have blamed their government, who, from my perspective, did the best they could in a bad situation. But that should be all the context you need to understand and enjoy what's happening here. My guest here is Sarah Stites. She and I attended Grove City College together. We were never really more than acquaintances at the time, but we've stayed in touch a little bit over the years, and she's living in Armenia as part of the Birthright Armenia program. It's similar to Birthright Israel, if you're familiar with that. And you'll find out the rest about her as you listen to the conversations. She is still there, and it seems like she's doing very, very good work. If you want to support the nonprofit she's working with, I'll also link to that in the show notes as well. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. How are you?
Okay. Doing as well as I can be doing in the midst of this craziness, but thanks for asking. How are you?
Yeah, doing all right. Live in like the DC area. Work at like a think tank here and do some freelance writing on the side.
Nice. Yeah, I'm from Nova, so this is all.
Okay, cool. Where are you from?
I'm from Reston.
Okay, yeah. I my last job was out there in kind of like Vienna, Reston area.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny, because of course I've spent most of my life in Nova, but it feels so far away right now.
Well, it is pretty far away.
Yeah, the American world, the Nova world, Washingtonian life.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about that. I mean, it's so crazy that, to me and to just kind of people here generally, the situation there is just something we kind of see on the news. It is something kind of very peripheral to what we would consider to be kind of the center of our world, but you're kind of right up there in the midst of it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to hear kind of about your experiences and your take on what's going on and everything. And so I figure I'll just like ask you a few questions, and I'm gonna let you talk mostly though. So I guess first of all would be like, how did you end up in Armenia? Just kind of take me from Grove City to today.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start a little bit before Grove City, and I'll say that I'm 25% Armenian. My grandfather was Armenian, but he died many, many years before I was born. My mom was 16 when he passed away. So I was never really connected to that side of my heritage. After graduating from Grove City, I started working in journalism in the DC area. And I wanted to cover some news related to continuing denial of the Armenian Genocide by the Turkish government. And so I ended up at an Armenian event in DC, and I felt so out of place, because I don't look phenotypically Armenian, and I didn't know anyone at this event. But that
And
was
your name's not really Armenian, right?
no,
Yeah.
no. My mom's name is Dana Mushoyan, and
Okay.
you can tell an Armenian last name if it has IAN or YAN at the end.
Yeah.
Like Alexis Ohanian, Kim Kardashian,
Yeah.
So I was at this party, and that was kind of my foray into the American Armenian world. And I ended up getting connected with some different groups, and someone told me about a program called Birthright Armenia. And you may have heard of Birthright Israel. Yeah, so Birthright Armenia is pretty much the same thing, because Armenia also has a large diaspora. So this is an effort to bring back young diasporan Armenians to the motherland, and expose them to the culture, give them an opportunity to learn the language, live with a host family, volunteer for an organization, and become more closely connected. And that's exactly what happened for me. So yeah, that's kind of a.
So when was that? When did you do that? What year was that?
Yeah, so I went to that event in December 2016. So shortly after graduation. We graduated the same year, yeah?
16.
What's that?
I was class of 16. May of 16.
Yeah, we were the same. Yeah. So just several months after graduation, I went to that event, and I thought, okay, I'm definitely going to do this program. But it wasn't till, when was it? June 2018 that I eventually made it to Armenia. And it's kind of strange, because when I arrived in Armenia, the Velvet Revolution here was just dying down. So basically there was a turnover of power in March, April, May 2018. And Nicole Pashinyan, who is our current prime minister, he came to power then, and he was a journalist turned politician, and considered by most Armenians to be like a really good sign of a new future for Armenia.
So what was the regime before that? What was the situation?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Hold on, what was the guy's name? There were so many corrupt guys before Nicole Pashinyan, I've kind of lost track. It was either Robert Kocharian or Serge Sarkisian. I think it was Serge Sarkisian. And the thing with him was he was corrupt, and there was a lot of corruption, nepotism, and other post-Soviet bad government, and that basically what it was. There had been a lot of attempts by the diasporan community to help Armenia develop, because after the Soviet Union collapsed and Armenia became an independent republic, it pretty much instantaneously became a very poor country because of a number of factors. The border with Turkey's always been closed because we'll get into that later about denial of the Armenian Genocide. It's complicated, but so there were conflicts from the beginning after the collapse of the Soviet Union. There were conflicts between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the very region that is now being fought over. So, it started immediately after the breakup of the Soviet Union. The city where I live in Armenia, called Gyumri, which is the second largest city in Armenia, suffered a huge earthquake that literally decimated the population of this region. 25,000 of the 250,000 citizens died, and many more were injured. So immediately there were a lot of problems that this new little country faced, and the leaders basically did not lead the country well during this time. There were lots of donations from the diasporan community, and these leaders, were corrupt and took a lot of that money. It didn't get to the people in need. So basically, Nicole Pashinyan was a breath of fresh air after these types of leaders, because he ran on the platform that he was going to really reduce corruption, and that there was going to be greater respect, for various freedoms. And he's, in my opinion, I've been in Armenia for basically his whole tenure, which is kind of interesting. Like, that turnover of power happened and then I came. I can't compare it to the past, but he's not perfect. I think he's not delivered on what everyone hoped he would, because who can, right? But I think he's done a good job. So where was I? I'm getting on so many tangents, sorry.
No, yeah, you're fine. I was just kind of asking how you got there, and what kind of work do you do there?
Oh yeah, good question. So
you've been there, and you've been there pretty much since 2018, right? You haven't have you been back at all?
I did. I came back May 2019 and stayed till the beginning of October. So I spent an extended summer last year. But I've already been in Armenia in total for 2 years, because I spent, June 2018 to May 2019. And then I came back October 8th, 2019, and tomorrow, October 8th, I'll have been here a full year. Tomorrow's my kind of my 1 year, anniversary.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And remind me, have you become an Armenian citizen?
Yes.
That's very impressive. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Because you can't have dual citizenship with Armenia, can you?
You can.
Oh, you can? Okay, I know there's only some countries where you can.
Yeah. Thankfully, yeah. No, I wouldn't have given up my U.S. That wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah, that's important.
Having duals, good.
And then, I imagine learning the language was difficult with the entirely different alphabet and everything.
Yeah, so there's something interesting about that, because I remember when I tried to learn Armenian back in what would it have been? In the months leading up to my initial departure, I was so frustrated because the letters all looked the same to me, and I thought, this is not a Romance language. I have no basis, with the vocabulary. There's no similarities with English. How am I ever going to do this? But I came to really realize that you learn languages from being immersed, and that's kind of, everyone says that, but I really understood it from firsthand experience, that you have to hear these things repeatedly and see the text on signs, constantly be exposed to it. And now I would say I'm solidly intermediate. I can make my way through Armenia and I'll do just fine. But if we have complicated conversations about politics or human rights or things like that, I might kind of not. But yeah, you asked about work. Do you want me to talk about work?
Yeah, sure. Can you talk a little bit about the work you're doing there?
Yeah, so I started doing the program I mentioned called Birthright, and they placed me in an organization called Emily Aragak Center, which is a therapeutic and social support center for kids with disabilities in Gyumri, the second biggest city in Armenia. And I started off as a volunteer in communications and fundraising, and really loved it. It's a very sunny place. Aragak means little sun in Armenian, and it really is very much a sunny place. It's a warm, inclusive, positive environment. And I've got to say, the city of Gyumri in general, especially when I came in 2018, it was a very depressing place because, it had suffered this earthquake and it still hasn't fully recovered over 30 years later. You know, there's still a lot of damaged buildings. The economy is really bad, so there are a lot of abandoned buildings. The streets were really bad. And so, yeah, I guess I'm saying that because this center where I work, it's completely different. It has huge windows. It's made from wood rather than concrete, and it has this big grassy backyard. So it's just a really bright, different place, you know, for kids with disabilities to be. And yeah, I fell in love with it. And another really cool thing that happened while I was here was that when I arrived, they were in the process of planning the opening of Armenia's first inclusive bakery, which is also called Aragak. And it was going to be a place that would provide employment opportunities for young adults with disabilities who really have no other opportunities in Gyumri, you know. So I got to be a part of that. We just celebrated our 2nd anniversary as a bakery. So yeah, so now I lead fundraising and communications for both the bakery and the center, and it's been really, really rewarding work.
That's awesome. So I imagine a lot of that is outreach to the kind of diasporan community.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it was really cool to hear you mention the you know, kind of how refreshing just the architecture was and the openness there. I imagine you've got a lot of kind of Soviet architecture left over that's just boring brick blocks, you know.
You got it. Yeah, you're exactly right. There are, you know, like rows and rows of apartment buildings that are already kind of falling apart, gray, dull, concrete, and you turn the corner in the district our building is in. You turn the corner and it's just, you feel like you've landed in the Alps, because I don't want to get too down this tangent, but we're funded, we receive a lot of funding from Austrian organizations. Mm-hmm. And so basically all of the materials for our building were brought from Austria. So it's alpine wood, all Austrian, everything. Like the toilets are Austrian, you know, the sinks are Austrian, the sign is Austrian, you know, everything. So yeah, you feel like you've kind of entered another country when you make that turn into.
Yeah. So here, if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen with you real quick, just so you can kind of show me. I have a map of Armenia here, so you can just show me where you are.
Yep. So move the arrow up and to the left and down now. You see Gyumri. Yep.
Gyumri. Okay, that's you. All right. And then I imagine the conflict is going on kind of down around here, right?
Yeah. So move your arrow up a little bit and to the right, to the right, to the right, to the right. Past Armenia. Oh,
okay.
Now to the left. Boundary of former Nagorno-Karabakh autonomous oblast. So that region there. And slightly to the right, you see there's a city called Stepanakert?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that region there where your arrow is, that outlined region, that is Artsakh, which is the Armenian word. Nagorno-Karabakh is the Russian word. And they're interchangeable. They're the same place. When I say Artsakh, it's the same as Nagorno-Karabakh.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this, yeah, I mean, just looking at this, these borders are deeply bizarre. I mean, these don't appear to be entirely contiguous, and then you have a piece of Azerbaijan over here that doesn't appear to be connected to the rest of Azerbaijan anyway. So
yeah,
just kind of great. Seems not like the best situation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I would recommend to you to not fully trust me on geopolitics, because it's such a complicated thing, you know, so do your own research. But
yeah, I'm definitely planning to do that for a kind of a frame for the article. Yeah, in terms of my question and answer with you, I really just want to get kind of a view from the ground. So yeah, just what was the kind of mood like, kind of the atmosphere in the country with the lead up to this conflict breaking out, and what has been your experience of that since it's started? I mean, you're you're obviously geographically not exactly on the front lines here, but I can tell just from your posts that it has affected you, certainly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll try and be as coherent as possible. There are a lot of different directions I could take, so I'm gonna talk, and feel free to interrupt. My foot's asleep. Sorry, one sec. Yeah. So I have a vivid memory because it was my friend's. Actually, okay, it was not only my friend's birthday the night before the war started. It was my workplace, Emily Aragak, the Center for Kids with Disabilities. It was our 5th anniversary. So I remember on that Saturday, I spent the whole day, you know, like working on various communications and fundraising things surrounding our 5th anniversary. And it was a crazy day, and I finally finished and made it late. You know, it was raining. I arrived to my friend's birthday party with flowers, you know, we were dancing, and the next morning I went hiking. And I remember we were still in the car on the way to go hiking, and I was scrolling through Facebook, and I saw there was a Facebook post from Nikol Pashinyan, our prime minister. And of course, you know, it was in Armenian letters, and I was tired, and I was like, oh, I don't want to translate what it says, you know, it's not important. Well, that was basically his announcement that the Azeris had invaded Artsakh. And, you know, I think the developments were pretty quick. And by midday, you know, like that morning, Sunday, September 27th, they had already declared martial law in the Republic of Artsakh as well as Armenia. And again, just to clarify, according to my knowledge, Artsakh is and has been populated by ethnic Armenians for a very long time. Although it has, you know, switched hands of who owns it, it is Armenian, you know, Armenian is ingrained in the land, you know. So it has its own president, and the people speak a form of Armenian, and the flag is very similar to the Armenian flag, but it's a kind of an independent republic currently owned by Azerbaijan. So anyway, they declared martial law, and the Republic of Armenia, backing Artsakh, also declared the law. So basically by Sunday, we knew the country was at war. And I can tell you, from my perspective, you know, I really didn't know what that meant. I knew that in July 2020, just a few months ago, there were some clashes down in Artsakh. And, you know, there was concern that it could escalate, but it didn't. It didn't escalate. There were deaths, but not very many, and it de-escalated. But I also knew that in 2016, there had been a war. In the 90s, there had been a war. So I didn't know. You know, I thought maybe it'll be like that little clash. Maybe it'll be a big thing. We didn't know. So, yeah, I remember getting back from my hike and learning, you know, this is serious, you know. A lot of my friends are really worried. Some of my other friends have already signed up, you know, have already gone off to enlist. You know, I wasn't even sure if we'd have work the next day. And then I started to get really nervous. I thought, oh gosh, you know, what does this mean for our country? And it was ominous too, you know, because the more I thought about it, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, you know, nations' eyes are turned inward, borders are closed, America's on the brink of a chaotic election. If there's any time to attack, now's the time strategically, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm noticing you're pretty far from the border with Azerbaijan and from the Nagorno-Karabakh region, but you're very close to the border with Turkey, who I know are also have also been quite hostile and been very supportive of Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
And are kind of the ancient enemy of Armenia as well, going back a long time. So you said you've had friends enlist in the military and go off to training. I saw on Facebook you mentioned that someone from your city or from your neighborhood or your community had actually died in the war already.
Yeah.
Can you talk through that experience?
Yeah. So before I get to that, I'll get to that in just a sec, but I want to
Sure.
say that one of the first people I knew to enlist was my godfather. We use the word kavor, which means godfather. And this is a dear friend of mine who works with me. And I actually got baptized into the Armenian Apostolic Church, and he was my baptismal godfather. So the man who takes my spiritual development into his,
Yeah.
responsible for my spiritual development. A really great guy, and I went to his wedding last year. So he enlisted right away. So he's the one who's always in the back of my mind, that I'm just so, and we haven't heard from him for 3 days. He calls his wife usually, and his wife tells all of us what the news is, but we haven't heard from him for 3 days. So that's we can only pray that he's fine and he just isn't able to contact us. So anyway, Tigran is his name. But anyway, yeah. So it was horrible with the neighbor. So the war started on Sunday, and on Wednesday morning, we woke up, my roommate and I woke up because I heard the sound of like bulldozers outside of our window. And I saw that very early in the morning, they were like not repaving the street because it's gravel, but they were filling in the potholes. And I thought, well, that's strange. It's 7 a.m. and they're doing this. And then I came out of my bedroom and my roommate said, I woke up early in the morning and heard our neighbors screaming. Which is just horrible to think about, and later that day, or maybe it was the next day, I'm losing track of the time, we saw some of the neighborhood young men erecting a banner on our street, and it said the name of this young man, Vikul, and his age, 26. And I remember seeing that number and thinking, I just turned 26, a week ago when I saw that sign. This young man died at 26, and I just celebrated that same number. I remember that striking me. And on Friday, I arrived back to my home after work, and I saw, the streets were just congested with cars like I'd never seen before. And there were so many people. Like at first I was really confused. I didn't know what was happening. And then I realized it was his funeral, and the whole neighborhood came out to support the family. And there was just this somber mood. People's eyes were hollow. Everyone was wearing black. And I wanted to take photos because I wanted people in America to understand, from a personal perspective, right, what this war meant. Because as you said, people in the States, I don't blame you guys for being confused. I'm confused about the politics, and when you just see a headline, Nagorno-Karabakh, people are like, what is that? What does this mean? But seeing all of those people, it was very visceral. And so I brought out my camera, and my other neighbor escorted me into the house, and it was horrible. There's a kind of a tradition of viewing the casket in Armenian culture. So he was lying there in his casket, just a shell of who he was. I knew, what everybody is, just a shell, of the person who fleshed out that body. And his mother was just sobbing, and everyone, yeah, it was horrible. This old woman next to me was just sobbing her heart out, and I felt instinctively I just had to pull her into my arms, and just stroked her head. And then I pulled out my camera to take a photo, and I felt really uncomfortable doing it. But again, I knew I needed to do this to have this kind of proof, this very visceral evidence of what was happening. And I pulled out the camera, and everyone's reaction, it was so embarrassing. They were all like, don't take a photo. And then in front of that whole group of people, I said in Armenian, you know, like, I'm so sorry, but I'm American Armenian and I really want to take this, I need to take this photo and send it home so people know. And they said, okay, you can do that. And the priest gave a very, very beautiful sermon, and he, you know, said the verse, I can't remember the reference, about, you know, how there's no greater love than laying down your life for a friend. And as I would later find out, Vikul was a very experienced military, even at age 26. You know, he had a military career. He was in the military. He wasn't a volunteer in this case. He actually worked in the military. And a younger soldier had left behind his bulletproof vest during a military maneuver, and Vikul removed his bulletproof vest and gave it to this other soldier. And shortly after that, I don't know exactly how he died, but it might have been shrapnel, it might have been direct gunfire, but he died. So yeah, it was horrible.
Was this person someone you'd known beforehand, or?
See, I think for me, that's one of the saddest pieces about it, because his house is literally across the street from mine, but the first time I meet this guy is when he's in his casket. You know, I didn't know the family. And now I also want to write an article about him, you know, like for the local media, a kind of a celebration of his bravery. And so I ended up going to the home the day after the funeral, and I talked with the family, and they got to share stories about him. And so I feel like now I'll have a friendship with them, but I would have liked to know him, because they talked about him in such a way that was just, I mean, of course people will do that when someone has passed away, but it sounded like he was a really special guy, you know, just full of life and always thinking about others. True hero.
So you mentioned that you've been received into the Armenian church, which congratulations.
Thank you.
And you mentioned this funeral and everything. So from my perspective, the first announcement I saw of this war was Armenia's official, like, English language Facebook account put out this photo of an Armenian, I don't know if you've seen it, put out a photo of an Armenian priest holding a crucifix in one hand and an assault rifle in the other. And like his Catholic collar and everything. It was crazy. Let me see if I can find it.
Oh my gosh, no, I did not see that. That seems a little chiquitum. I don't know.
Yeah, it was very intense. But it did, and I can't remember the exact caption, but it was this, you know, this call to arms to defend Armenia. And I was just curious. You know, Armenia was the first country on earth to accept Christianity as a whole, and it still seems to be deeply ingrained there. What's the, you know, what's that look like on the ground there in terms of, you know, kind of the public discourse around it, like the, you know, the statements the government's putting out and stuff, is that being highlighted, and, you know, in terms of church life and everything as well, and just prayer life in general. I guess, you know, how is religious life kind of expressing itself in Armenia right now?
Yeah, I mean,
and just generally, you know, what does it mean to you to kind of become an Armenian apostolic Christian?
Right. So, you know, I have a lot of thoughts about Armenian Christianity, because, yeah, as you said, we're the first Christian nation, or the first nation to officially accept Christianity as the state religion, and that's beautiful, and Armenians are so proud of that. But I really strongly feel the cultural nature of it. Yeah. You know, it's kind of like when everyone is something, no one is something, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, if everyone is Christian, then there's nothing really distinctive about it anymore. And it's very easy to kind of just blend in with the crowd and say, oh yes, I'm Christian. But I very much feel that Christianity is more, is culture. The two are kind of equated. And I don't really get the sense from Armenian Christians that, for example, we should live a certain way, or we should do a certain thing or shouldn't do a certain thing because the Bible says it and Jesus says it, but because that's just the way it's done, the way it's not done, you know? So that's really hard to see, because when you go into the Apostolic Church, you feel, I don't know, I want to be careful with how I say it because it's beautiful. You know, it's a very rich faith tradition, clearly, and there's symbolism and, yeah, richness. Richness is the word that I would use, but at the same time, it can feel kind of cold and empty. And the younger crowd, I think, are starting to kind of distrust the church. So, yeah, I mean, right now, a lot more people are going to pray and are going to light candles and things. And when they pass the church, you know, they do the crucifix 3 times. There's a lot of ritual involved, but it seems to me like it's empty ritual. I can't say that for sure, but that's the feeling that I get.
Sure.
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, at the same time, there's kind of a growing non-denominational, more evangelical, you know, Armenian movement. And it's really interesting because they're looked on kind of as a cult by the Apostolic Church. So everything in Armenia is complicated.
Yeah. And what was your kind of religious background before you were received into the Armenian Church?
Kind of all over the map. So I grew up going to a non-denominational Bible church. You probably know it, Bible church.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And then let's see. So I studied abroad in Northern Ireland during college, and I went to a charismatic church in Northern Ireland, which is a whole nother story. Because just minor aside, but I love this story. My friends who, you know, did not go to that church, they would ask me about the church, and they would say, you know, is it Catholic or Protestant? And I would say, well, you know, it's really neither. It's neither. And they would say, no, you don't understand. Is it Catholic or is it Protestant?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, from your Irish framework, it must be one or the other.
Yeah.
But yeah, so charismatic, and then I went to Grace Anglican.
Yeah.
Which, did you also go to Grace Anglican?
Yes, I did. Yeah, and I go to an Anglican church in Northern Virginia now. I go to. It's called Restoration. It's pretty new. It's a shoot off of the Falls Church Anglican, though, which was like the really big church there.
Yeah. I've heard of both.
Yeah, the Falls Church Anglican just built a new building, like right on Route 50. Actually, it's beautiful. But...
Yes, I've been there. It's not super recent, right? I think it was in.
It's within like the last year. You might have had a chance to go when you were back in 2019.
Yeah. I did. Yeah. Or maybe, you know, they were meeting in the adjacent building, I think. Maybe
they were meeting in all over the place. Actually, they were at like a high school gym for a long time, but they finally have a building. But I mean, it's definitely a switch into Armenian Christianity from a lot of the traditions that you've come from. You know.
Yeah. And you know, to be completely honest with you, I still don't know how I feel about. Actually, I do know how I feel about this. I don't like it, but I did it. Whatever. The main reason for this baptism was actually involving my citizenship, because I could not receive citizenship without being baptized into the church, which is a really weird.
Really?
And I'm not comfortable with that, because that goes part and parcel with what I was saying to you about how the faith and the culture are kind of equated, that if you're Armenian, you must be Christian, which kind of takes out the choice, takes out the individuality, right? So, on the one hand, I'm baptized into the church, but on the other hand, I'm not at the point where I would call myself a staunch Armenian apostolic, you know, like, so Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I mean, it makes sense, certainly, that it's so ingrained culturally. I mean, generally, any time a country's, I feel like historically, just like whenever a country's under threat by another country of a different religion, that religion
Mhm.
becomes very ingrained in the national identity. Like
Absolutely.
Protestantism in England didn't really catch on until they were under threat from Catholic Spain, and then all of a sudden, to be a good Englishman, you had to be a good Protestant.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so I wanted to ask about martial law too. You mentioned the country's under martial law. What have you seen any changes as a result of that, in terms of any kind of restrictions?
At this point, no, it's not really affected us here. But, you know, like, for example, I think the Ministry of Health, you know, has banned any sort of elective procedures at this time because the, you know, all of the medical force are focusing on, you know, like soldiers in need of medical care. So things like that, you know, and I guess, I guess the military are informing all government decisions at this point.
Mhm.
But I did expect there would be some sort of, you know, more tangible
Mhm.
effect, martial law, but no, I haven't really.
Yeah, like Facebook still works and everything.
Right, right, exactly. It's not, yeah, there's no curfew, there's no, you know, like ban on, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, okay, so one of the last things I wanted to ask, and this will probably be kind of a long question because I want to tee it up.
Sure, sure.
So, like, the short version of the question is, like, what would you want people back here in America to know? And you mentioned, like, that's why you wanted to take that picture and everything. But
Yeah.
I guess more broadly, like, how has your Armenian experience sort of been different from your American experience, just of military conflict generally? Because I mean, the whole time we've been alive, essentially, the United States has been at war. But these are kind of wars of choice rather than wars of necessity. Um, and they're far across the world. The United States, you know, it's been 150 years since the United States has had to fight a war within or on its own borders, and has almost never had to fight kind of a defensive war against foreign aggression, on our actual homeland. Uh, and so, yeah, it's something that very much kind of goes on in the background, and that, and then also, you know, things are just very divisive in America. Like, I'm sure you and I both very vaguely remember, like, the sort of burst of patriotism after 9/11, but, um, you know, that obviously faded really quickly. So I guess just in terms of the polarization and the kind of role war plays in American society, how have you seen that be different in Armenia?
Okay, a lot of different angles here. Let me see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try and just answer them in chunks as I think of different
Sure.
facets of your question. So I think on the one hand, I can say I I fully admit I have been very critical of many aspects of Armenian culture. You know, like coming in as a pretty true American, you know, there are a lot of things about the culture here that would grate on my nerves that I didn't understand, you know? And I think through it all, I've really tried, you know, to take the good from Armenian culture and keep what I think is good in American culture and kind of dovetail the two into the way that I live, you know, like take the good from both. But I think this conflict has really informed and kind of amended the way I see Armenians, because now I have a greater understanding of what it means to be Armenian, the collective trauma that they've faced, you know, intergenerational trauma, as well as just, you know, like in the past 30 years. For example, my roommate was born just several months after this horrible earthquake that I mentioned in Gyumri. Her father died when she was a teenager. Her mother died last year. A couple of her other relatives died in a gas leak in between that time. And she has seen, you know, all of the wars we talked about with Azerbaijan. Her relatives, you know, way back, some of them died in the genocide, you know, so there's a lot of trauma that runs in the genes of Armenians. And I think because of this, they stick together. They care a lot about having a good time because they've seen so many bad times.
Yeah.
You know? So like I came in with this very specific mindset of what life should be like, but that was informed by my own experience, right? So now I see what they've had to live through, and I'm more empathetic now for them. You know, the way that they live makes more sense. You know, I think probably one of the reasons that they tend to live together in extended family, you know, and they call all their relatives all the time. They're constantly on the phone, constantly, you know, socializing, and I'm more of an introvert, you know. They need to form those close bonds, those networks to stay strong as this small people between two aggressive countries, you know. So yeah, that's been a slow process of awakening for me, realizing, oh wow, you know, I cannot compare these two peoples. They're very different. Let's see. Another thing I want Americans to know, I think, when I took that photo, is that, yeah, I mean, every time you read an article in the newspaper that says some place is at war or there's a conflict someplace, even if you've never heard of it, you know, you need to be imagining pictures like that one I posted, right? Because these are human lives. There are families mourning those people, and very frequently these conflicts are almost senseless, you know. So just like always remember to keep your humanity when you read headlines, I guess. But in this specific case, I very much and very strongly want to say that Armenia suffered an attempted genocide, right, between 1915 and 1918 at the hands of Turkey. And Turkey has remained a hostile neighbor for Armenia, but not only for Armenia. You know, I think most of us in the world right now agree that Turkey is the main aggressor of the region, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that Azerbaijan is a close ally of Turkey, and that these two nations were clearly and strategically planning this attack during this time of pandemic, presidential election. It's the beginning of winter here in Armenia. Like it's a very cruel move, and Azerbaijan aggressed. You know, a lot of the media are saying Armenia and Azerbaijan need to quit their conflict. You know, like they're both equally to blame. But just from my understanding, no. You know, Azerbaijan aggressed here, and Armenia was defending its own nation as well as the people that live. Its people live in this Republic of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. So yeah, I really want people to know that Armenians are fearing that intergenerational trauma is rising up in them, and they are getting flashbacks, you know, not only the stories they've heard of the genocide, but also back in the 90s when there was this war that killed 30,000 people, you know, the whole conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And Armenians are worried, you know, they are sandwiched between Turkey and Azerbaijan, and they know both of these countries really hate them. And yeah, of course there's fear that, you know, like, what if no one comes to our aid? What if this escalates into another attempt to finish off what was started in 1915? So, yeah, I really want the world to remember that genocide happens slowly. Or the lead up to genocide can be slow, you know, like it doesn't happen immediately. And we always need to be very wary and put a stop to aggressors like Turkey and Azerbaijan before things get out of hand.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I've pretty much got what I need here. So I'll work on transcribing this, and I'll probably, since we've been kind of freewheeling and switched between kind of personal topics and things I'm actually interested in for the interview, I'll definitely like do some editing for length and clarity. But whatever I do end up doing, I'll show you first. Of course. Yeah, I did. So if I could ask like one more question, I guess, I mean, you kind of went over some of this already, in terms of your different experiences of Armenian and American culture, but would, okay, I guess like, do you plan on staying in Armenia kind of long term? Is that on your radar?
Oof. This is such a hard question for me to answer. You know, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I really do. Other times I'm super frustrated. I'm thinking, no, like I can only make it one year and I'm going back home. I think it's just, you know, there's some really wonderful things about it and there are some really difficult things about it. And this year especially, it's been difficult just because of COVID and the war.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And my role at work is really exciting, but I'm also kind of developing a fundraising department from the ground up. So it's cool, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, then the people are really kind and the nature's beautiful and it's on the brink of something great. You can feel it here, you know, like there's the IT industry is really burgeoning, you know, like there's a lot of opportunities to start businesses and be involved in initiatives. So I feel like I could accomplish more here maybe than I could back in DC because it's just not as developed, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've thought about starting a business. I think in my ideal world, I would spend the rest of my life kind of alternating back and forth between the U.S. and the U.S. and Armenia, like, you know, 9 months of the year in one country, 3 months in the other, and continue to stay involved in both experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, what you're saying is so interesting because on one hand, like, you know, this is something I've been thinking about a lot too, just being here and, you know, having the election coming up, especially, and COVID and just everything kind of, and just the kind of protests and civil unrest that are going on in America. You know, there are definitely times where I'm like, oh, America is just so, you know, America's such a wealthy country, but at the same time, we're so divided and I feel like so jaded and cynical and so kind of partisan and split against each other that, you know, there's a big part of me that thinks like, you know, that's often jealous of of like being somewhere where there is more of this sense of kind of shared identity and this sense of a shared purpose. And yeah, I don't know. This is just me kind of thinking, but like, have you experienced that there as well?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I always just think of the grass is always greener, you know, on the other side. I always think that because, yeah, I mean, and people, it's funny, Armenians will always ask me, and they're so proud of their nation, right? So like taxi drivers laugh, you know, oh, you're from America? Well, which one's better, Armenia or America? And I know what they want to hear, and I always tell them, look, they're just different. I love America in many ways, and I love Armenia in many ways, but like, they're different. One's not better than the other, you know? And I can tell you there are some days I just want to collapse crying because I feel so lonely and I miss so much certain things that I love to do that I just can't do here. And there are some days where I feel so oppressed by like not being able to find my own personal space and just relax, and people ask me impertinent questions and get in my business, and I just, you know, like need a break from Armenians, you know? But then, you know, there are times when I'm in the middle of the wild nature or I'm at a party where I really feel like I'm connecting and, you know, like people laugh at a joke I make in Armenian or compliment language skills, or I feel like, you know, I'm making some development at work that I would never have been able to do in the States because, you know, it would have already been developed there. But, you know, like I'm putting that into a new frontier here and it's just like exciting, you know? So yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm always going to feel divided no matter where I live now, right? Because I'm a person of both countries and my heart is in both places. And I guess ultimately I would just say I understand where you're coming from. I hope someday that you can take some time and live in a different place. And have you lived abroad before or
I
studied
studied abroad in Spain when I was in college. I graduated my senior year, first semester, and I really liked it. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was really cool just to get a different perspective there. And I definitely experienced some of what you're talking about. Spain, basically everyone's Catholic, but like no one, actually goes to mass or like
right
cares.
right
But they, there's kind of shrines on the streets all over the place, and everybody has a crucifix in their house. But
right
my host mother, I remember, my host mother was like very right wing and would like complain about Muslim immigration into Spain a lot, and she would say something like, "Catholicism is our religion, and if I choose not to practice it, that's my business."
Oh my gosh. Oh,
Which
it's
really stuck.
fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that I think that the juxtapositions are most interesting. Like I can tell you the drivers in the buses, they have these pictures, like all up on the dashboard. So, like they've got a picture of the Virgin Mary juxtaposed with like a picture of a scantily clad woman. Like pick one or the other, but don't put them next to each other. It's like this is very, like choose one.
Yeah.
Oh.
And what made you decide to go through with becoming an Armenian citizen? Because I mean that's a big step, obviously. I'm sure you didn't have to do that to be there for your program. So.
Well, interesting, right? Part of it was kind of necessity because in order to be paid, so basically, you have a couple of options. You can pay a large amount to have a work visa, or you can pay a small amount for citizenship. And if you have, like the heritage path, then citizenship is easier. So it was mostly for my work contract. But there's some other cool, benefits. Like I can travel visa free to Russia and China.
Okay.
And if I want, I can go to Iran. Right now, I'm like, Iran is probably the nicest place to go right now because my options in terms of borders are not too great. So travel, work, I can, work as many jobs, side jobs, whatever, just, with normal.
That's nice.
Yeah. And I think there are a couple of other things, but not that important. Those were the main things.
Cool. Yeah, well, hey, thank you for talking to me. I'll try and get this transcribed and edited soon. I might reach out with help spelling Armenian names of things.
Yeah.
If I can't figure it out. But yeah, thank you so much. And I'll keep you posted as the kind of process moves forward.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Truly, you can reach out anytime for clarifications or whatever. I get it. I freelance too, so I know the whole, and be as free as you need to. I get it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for really kind of putting me there. I can, what you said about the kind of built up trauma there really resonated.
Yeah.
And it seems like there really is this sense that this very well might be more than just a border skirmish, that, it's entirely within the realm of possibility that they'll wake up one morning to Turkish tanks rolling down their streets.
Yeah. Actually, on that note, if you want some good background for the, regarding the geopolitics, Walter, I think his name's Walter Russellmead. I think I'll send it to you. He wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal a couple days ago that really very beautifully walks through the background as well as the complicated politics of why no country wants to get involved right now. So it provides, yeah, really nice. I'll send that to you on Facebook.
Sure, yeah, please do. Thanks.
Okay, good.
Have a good one.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye. Stay safe.